we begin with breaking news. The man who massacred Jews at a Pittsburgh synagogue is now staring down the death penalty. A jury just found that shooter guilty on multiple counts, nearing 40 counts so far. They're still reading in that courtroom. It includes capital offenses and hate crimes. I want to go outside the courtroom. That is where we have CNN's Danny Freeman live in Pittsburgh. Danny, what are you hearing so far?
Well, Dana, as you said, we are getting live reports from our reporter who's inside the courtroom as we speak, illustrating each single one of these counts. And so far, we've been through 40, including special instructions so far. All have been found guilty. And that is including, Dan, as you said, the 22 capital offenses. Remember, Robert Bowers, he faces 63 federal charges, already convicted of 41 now, I should say. 22 are capital offenses. And I just want to read the capital offenses he's facing. It's obstruction of free exercise of religious belief resulting in death, and then also the use and discharge of a firearm to commit murder during and in relation to a crime of violence and possession of a firearm in furtherance of a crime of violence. And also, Dana, convicted so far on all of the hate crimes that he was accused of earlier. And I just want to reset for a moment. This is a long time coming. This shooting happened on October 27th, 2018. This community in Pittsburgh, this Jewish community in Pittsburgh, has been waiting for some kind of justice, some kind of answer to have their day in court, and they're getting this as we speak. And just, if it's all right, I'll read the names, specifically where these capital offenses come in. Robert Bowers, convicted of killing and obstructing their ability to exercise their religious beliefs, Joyce Feinberg, Richard Gottfried, Rose Mallinger, Jerry Rabinowitz, Cecil Rosenthal, David Rosenthal, Bernice Simon, Sylvan Simon, Daniel Stein, Melvin Wax, and Irving Younger. So, Dana, that's the latest from this point. We're now, after these this full list of charges and convictions, if they continue this way, are done and finished, then we will move on to the death penalty phase. And that's where we're expecting the defense to actually spend a lot more time trying to spare Robert Bowers' life, essentially, because they never disputed that he was the one who came into that synagogue and killed those 11 worshipers. They were just trying to poke holes in the motive. We heard that in the closing arguments yesterday, but I think we're going to see a lot more activity from the defense in this death penalty phase. I'll also note the prosecution called 60 witnesses to get to this guilt phase. The defense did not call a single witness, and they only cross-examined a handful. So again, we're looking at these verdicts coming through. 46 now convictions for Robert Bowers in the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting trial. Dana.
Danny, 46 so far. Again, we should say that as we speak, because it is a federal court, we don't have cameras in, we don't have audio in, but we do have a producer in there who is getting us the information. 63 charges in total. As you said, Danny, 22 capital charges. He is guilty on those, and we're waiting for the rest of the 10 and change or so. We're going to get back to you when you get more information as we get all of the counts, Danny. I want to bring in Elie Honig, CNN legal analyst. And Elie, so much to explore here with you. I just want to say, first and foremost, I know obviously you're an attorney, and I want you to give me the legal point of view and import of this. But just in reading what has happened during the course of this trial, the prosecutors laying out in very stark, harrowing detail about this shooter going into this synagogue where three separate congregations were worshiping at the same time on that day in October of 2018. He was hunting down Jews who were worshiping. Some were wrapped in their prayer shawls. Some were clutching their prayer books. And now we have a jury in the midst of finding him guilty of capital offenses.
Yeah, Dana, this is a moment of deep solemnity and grief, and one would hope some measure of justice for the victims and for their families and for the entire community. This is the worst single anti-Semitic attack, the most deadly anti-Semitic attack in United States history. And what's really important to me about this verdict, and I imagine to the victims and the families, is that prosecutors had to prove, and now the jury has found, as a necessity under law, that the reason this person committed this heinous attack was because of anti-Semitism, because he was motivated by hatred for Jewish people. You cannot find this individual guilty unless you find that that's the reason for the attack under the hate crimes laws. The jury has now made that finding. And, you know, Dana, our system Our justice system can never undo what's done. It can never undo the hurt, but it hopefully can deliver at least some measure of justice and solace. And that's what we've seen here today from this jury.
Yeah, and Ellie, as we continue to talk, I want to put the names and the faces of those who were hunted and murdered on that day in October of 2018. We heard Danny read the names, and these are individuals who now has been found by a jury of their peers that they were killed because this man went in and had hate in his heart, and hate in his heart specifically when it comes to Jews. Again, as we talk about that and the solemnity of that, when you think about the legal impact and the legal import of this being the biggest and the most, the biggest massacre of Jews in American history of this kind, what does it say when it comes to precedent of this kind of hate crime in the legal system?
Well, a couple of important things here, Dana. First of all, the fact that the Justice Department chose to bring this case, chose to bring federal charges. And ordinarily, a murder is a state level crime. And there are state charges that have been put on hold pending this investigation in this case. But I think it was a powerful statement by the United States Department of Justice, made actually under the prior administration when this horrible event happened, that we are going to prosecute this as a hate crime, that we are going to argue and prove to a jury that the reason that this man went into a synagogue was intentional because he hated Jewish people. He had posted things online that he wanted to kill all Jews, but there was a strange sort of defense argument here that actually he wanted to, he was angry at immigrants, not Jewish people, but immigrants. And the jury has soundly rejected that. So now we know that a jury has found, and I think this is, I imagine this is quite significant for the families and the victims, that the reason for this murder was anti-Semitism.
Ellie, stand by, because I want to go back to Danny, because all the counts have been read now. Danny, what are they?
At this point, we have the information from inside the courtroom that Robert Bowers has been found guilty of all 63 federal charges. That includes all 22 capital offenses. That also includes all of the hate crimes that he was charged with. And I should be clear, this does not just mean that he was convicted of the murders of the 11 worshipers who were killed that day, but it's also a conviction for the other members of the 3 separate congregations who were injured, the other members of those congregations who were terrified. They were hiding, as Robert Bowers, as the prosecution said, methodically hunted these Jewish people all throughout the synagogue. That's all encompassing within the 63 charges that Robert Bowers was just found guilty of. And I want to note, then, if it's okay, and listening to the discussion they're having with the folks on your panel, remember, this is not over yet. The majority of the people that we heard from take the stand over the past 3 weeks were eyewitnesses, people who were there inside that synagogue that day and survived, or we heard 911 calls from those who did not. But we, very importantly, have not heard from, for example, the sisters of Cecil and David Rosenthal, who were killed in that synagogue that day. We have not heard from other family members who very much have been inside that courtroom and expect to testify as part of this larger trial. So we're going to hear much more you can expect from folks like them in this next phase, the death penalty phase. But the other thing I will add is that, I mentioned this earlier, we should expect to also hear more from the defense. The defense is going to try and spare Robert Bowers his life in this case. You can expect that. And we have not heard from a single witness from the defense, but the defense promised in their opening arguments that they would try to bring more context as to what motivated him to come into that synagogue. And really all we've heard so far is some of those smaller, shorter arguments that, well, maybe it was about immigrants and not Jewish people. But as your panel said earlier, this verdict does confirm, at least in the eyes of a jury of his peers, that Robert Bowers came to that synagogue and shot and killed those Jewish congregants because they were Jewish.
Absolutely. And that same jury, Danny, thank you so much. We will get back to you. That same jury, as I bring back in Ellie and also Caroline Polisi, an attorney, a former prosecutor, will be hearing the additional evidence that Danny was just talking about as they deliberate whether or not to give this shooter the death penalty. Caroline, your thoughts?
Yeah, as Danny indicated, we call those victim impact statements. They are often incredibly moving, incredibly powerful testimony. As you noted, this is a bifurcated trial. We know now that those 22 capital eligible charges have been, the jury has found him guilty of those. We'll move immediately into the sentencing phase now, where the sort of level of evidence allowed is different. As you noted, the defense will put on more evidence, what's known as aggravating factors versus mitigating factors. They will try to argue that although he has been found guilty of these charges, he should not be given the death penalty. The prosecution obviously will argue that the death penalty should be imposed, and we'll see more evidence in that regard. But it's just a resounding verdict and a resounding victory for the Department of Justice here today.